Okay, this is a follow-up to the first video I did, which was just a real simple, basic how to use Gimp to get a paint in iRacing. First, I know I'm hard to understand. You know, cancer 10 years ago, cancer-free now, half a tongue, reconstruction, throat surgery, tough shit. If you want to know more about all that, you can watch the first part of the first video in this series, I guess if you want to call it. I am sorry if you have trouble understanding me, but there's nothing I can do about that. There was some questions about how do you duplicate the design that I'd done in the first video, and the design's not here anymore. But what had happened was I'd had the base selected. I'd grabbed my pen tool here and I'd done some things and whatever and made some designs and then I filled it in with black and there was just a little design here on the side. Now the problem with that is when you do it on your base layer here, like what you see I've just done, I can't move that around without moving all this white to different areas. You want to create a new layer for things like that. You want to create a new layer for essentially everything. You can combine layers later if you want to do that to make it more user friendly, but so we're gonna get rid of that design and the best way to do that if you can't undo it because you've saved it already that way is just click on that base layer. This is just the main color that's under the mask. Um, and then go to your bucket tool, make sure it says fill hole selection, make sure your base layer is selected and hit that. All we're doing is taking a picture that's 1024 by 1024 and making it white. If you made everything else invisible but this is all you would see. For example, I'll drag this layer all the way to the top. That's all that layer is. But because it's underneath all these other layers, this is what you see. So if you were to make the mask invisible, that's what you would see, and then you make your parts invisible, and that's the case. So you want to make sure that, for example, that's why I have my logos folder above my graphics folder. So all my logo layers are going to be above anything that's in my graphics tab, and there's going to be exceptions to every rule, but for now that's what we're doing. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to duplicate that layer and but first what you want to do is create a new layer to make that design on. So to create a new layer, you click on the layer that you want the new layer above. So I want the new layer above this base layer. This base layer is going to be the very lower layer. So I click on the base layer and you can do one of two ways. You can either hit here, this little tab down here where it says create new layer. You want to leave it the same size for now and make it transparent. Then you're just going to have an invisible layer that's the same size as everything else. You hit OK. You could also right click on there, on the layer below where you want the new one, and then just go up here to where it says new layer. Right click is your best friend. It really is for PCs. Macs, of course, are a different story, but for PCs, right click for everything I've found. If I'm having trouble with something, it usually solves that issue. So it's the same with GIMP. Right click and you'll see some options that you didn't see before, or it might help you find your way. So anyway, we have our new layer selected, and now we're going to create a little design here on the side, and I'm going to show you how to duplicate that on the other side. What I find to be the most efficient and easiest way to do it, and it's not that difficult. So we're going to grab our path tool, and we're just going to make a real standard design here. And by the time we're done with some of these tutorials, we may have a GIMP car. Maybe that's just what we'll plan on doing. So we just click where we want our little dot or points or nodes or whatever you want to call it. And I imagine how I would like this to look. I'm going to want this to come maybe down and up and around to where the number is on this side of it. So that's where that's going to be. And then in the first video I showed you how to move these, and we'll do that again. And then we're going to want another one that maybe does the same thing up behind it, and then maybe it comes here, and then maybe the whole thing just kind of drifts up to the back end here. So these are just so when we're done, we'll hit enter and we'll complete where we're at. So the first thing I want to do is let's zoom in a little bit, hold control, mouse wheel forward, and we want to, wherever you drag this, it's going to have a different effect on this line. So we just want to come up here and we want to drag, because we want this to come way around. Let's move this up a little bit because of how I want it to look. We're going to drag this. Let's go over some of these lines, and that's okay as long as you can get to them later. So we want this to be about like that, because what we're going to do over here is drag this line. You hold your mouse wheel, click and drag. And that's not too bad. Again, this isn't going to be a fantastic design or paint job or anything to that effect. And now we want, this is going to be the base of the one behind it, so we want to do the same sort of thing. Let's move some of these nodes out of the way. You just click on the dots to move them for now. So we want this to come around and, you know, maybe a little bit bigger. Let's click, if you have one selected but you want to move it, it's going to move both of these. See? So just click on a separate node to get back, and then click on this one individually, and this one's the one we want to move, just like that. And then we want another one maybe to come up behind it, maybe from there. So we'll move that over there, this here, and then we'll move this like so. We'll maybe move this over a little bit, and then we'll drag this off. And this is just all stuff you'll have to play with. And, you know, hopefully eventually you come up with something you like. Actually, this is going to be over here, because we're going to want this to come down. And this might not even appear in the, yeah, you know what, we're going to leave it right here for now. It doesn't really matter too much. That's all going to be black. And then let's drag this down so it looks like it's sweeping up a little bit, maybe from there. It doesn't matter much, not for our purposes. So now when we hit enter, it's going to do a selection here. Make sure your new layer is selected. If you have this selected, you hit enter. Oops. That's the last thing we wanted to do. What I did was I hit enter when I had when I had a layer highlighted. So what it does is it affects this toolbar. So let's click on this again. That's all that did. Go back over here. Now it's not highlighted, so we have this selected. Hit enter, and it makes that a selection. If we were to fill it here, make sure this base is selected. If we were to fill it here, now it's part of that main base, and if later we wanted to move that, just that black part, we couldn't do it because we'd have to move all of that. So let's hit Control Z to back out. Select the layer, the new layer, the transparent layer, and then we just do a bucket fill, and now we have it on its own layer, and now it's something we can work with by duplicating, shrinking, resizing, and it doesn't affect the base layer. So what we want to do is we want to deselect this. Again, you can either go to select and go to none right here, or you can hold control, hit shift, hold A, or hold shift and then hit A. That's a shortcut for deselect. Now what we want to do is we want to duplicate this to the other side of the car. So let's zoom out, hold control, mouse wheel back. To do that, we want to select, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to crop the image down to just the size of this design. Right now, that layer with just that little bit of work on it is this whole size. Everything's transparent but what you see, but the whole layer is that size. So if we were to go, let's say we wanted to resize this or move it around or whatever. If we click on our scaling, keep aspect is really you always want to do, and you click on here, you see these blocks up here. You can see because it surrounds the area that you're resizing. If you look at all that, it selected that whole layer, and really we just wanted to resize just that design. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's cancel that. What you want to do is you go over to your layer here, you right click on it and go alpha to selection. Now what that's going to do is it's just going to select anything that's not transparent on that whole layer. And that's what we've done here. Now you go over here to where we're at, right click, go to layer, crop to selection. If you go to image, anything you do in image is going to affect the image. Anything you do with the layer option is just going to affect the layer that you have highlighted over here. So we have that layer highlighted. We click in here. Oops, we don't want to do that. we just make sure that we have the layer highlighted. Go over here, click anywhere on this outside window. Right click, or you could have just right clicked in here. Go to layer, crop to selection. Now, instead of that layer being the size of the whole thing here, 1024, it's now only the size of the design. It makes it easier to move around and do different things with. What you want to do now, instead of, if I were to go resize it with that selection, you know, you can see how these dotted lines are still blinking. If I tried to resize it now, I could. But as soon as I do it, if you look up here, it put it at the very top and made it a floating selection. Now it's harder to mess with. You can see how it screwed it up down here. So what you want to do is, we'll back out of that. If you right click, no, I'm sorry, not right click. We want to deselect it so it's not blinking. So you go, again, select and none, or you just hold control, hold shift, and then hit A and deselect it. Now if we were to resize it, we click on it. Now we can resize it, hit scale, and it doesn't move. It's right where it's supposed to be. It doesn't make it a floating selection or any of that nonsense. Control Z to go back right where we're at. And you can tell this layer is only that big from this yellow line. Now what we want to do is move it to the other side. So the best way that I found to do that, make sure your layer is selected, right click, and we're going to duplicate that layer. Now there's two of them, one right on top of the other, but we need it to be the opposite vertically. So you go up here to where it says layer, transform, flip vertically. And there you go. The other way you can do it is, you know, if you have your selection, your scale tool here, you can click on this and then just move this down like that. Well, maybe it won't let you do that, which is funny. Some of the other programs do, but yeah, that's a little bit strange. But the best way to do it anyway is layer, transform, flip vertically. So now, when we go to move it, you grab your move tool here, select it. You can move it around wherever you want it, and all you're moving is the cropped area, which is nice. If we hadn't cropped that down, you'd be moving that whole area, including the transparent part. But instead of just grabbing it and moving it, what we're going to do is we're going to hold control. I'm sorry, we're going to grab it with our mouse, hold our mouse button down, hold control, and then just slightly move it, and you'll see it'll stay right in line with this other one. You can still move it off center a little bit, but if you hold control, it makes it easier to keep it right in the same path. And now we just want to move it to this other side. We get it close, have you move to it, and then now use your arrows for the finer adjustments. And we want to just look at some reference points here. We can see that it is just under that little rivet right there. So we click on that, make sure we click there, use our arrow key, and we'll scroll down to where that comes out just under that little rivet. But not under the other one. You can see this other rivet, if you look real close, you scroll in, control, zoom in. This other rivet's, it goes right to the center of it essentially. So we'll mouse wheel down without control and it just moves it, and that's about where we want it. That's pretty close. Control, mouse wheel back, zoom back out, and that's how you duplicate your layer. And now we can do whatever we want with these layers. Again, you know, that looks like shit. It's not that great, but, you know, this was just a demonstration on how to do this. So, we're going to put this in iRacing, take a look at it real quick. Again, because we opened up Gimp and had to start over, we're going to export this to the proper path, and we'll show you how to do that. File, Export, Documents, iRacing, Paint. The old paint folders are under the color folders. This is where I believe, and I could be wrong, that Trading Paint still has theirs. But for our purpose, it doesn't matter. We just want to look at it as we're painting. Later, when we use Trading Paints, it'll probably go into here. And anything you have in one of these new folders, you're going to want to get rid of, or you won't see the Trading Paints card. So again, iRacing Paint, we're going to use one of these new folders just for this purpose. Stock Car Chevy SS. This is where my paint already is from before when we worked on it. We're going to double click and replace it. Make sure RLE compression's on, bottom left, find export. And now every time we make a change, we just hold control and hit E. It'll export to wherever the last place was that you exported to. So we don't have to go through that process every time we want to make a change and see it. So we'll open up here. You hit Control 12. It'll bring this menu up. We want to scroll around to the other side. I just use my arrow or my A, W, S, and D keys. Let's take this, just this static view here because this is a little bit screwy. And get to somewhere it's comfortable. Okay. Now we just hit Control R, hold Control, hit R, and there's our new design. And if we scroll around to the other side, it's there too, and it looks pretty even for the most part. And so what we'll do is we'll do this with one more item, and then we'll come back here and take a look. We'll just minimize this, go back in here. I'll move this Gimp head over like we did before. So you grab it, right click, duplicate this image is what we're going to do. And now we're going to want to turn it a little bit. Because that's what we're going to want eventually. You can't really, if you try to move it when you highlight this arrow before you're done, it gets really kind of goofy. It's better to just get it rotated close to where you want, hit rotate, grab your move tool, and then let's just move it over. Now, if we leave it here, let's resize that a little bit. That's a little bit bigger than what I wanted. You resize, grab this. Let's get it. Now you can move it around. The resize tool allows you to move it fairly easy. It's the rotate tool that makes it a little bit more difficult. And let's something like that. Should work fine. And we're going to lower the transparency because we don't want this to take away. Eventually we'll have something up here that says Gimp in their font, and this will take away from that in my opinion. So we just drop it down so it's just kind of a ghost image to some extent. So that's not too bad. It kind of affects when you're transparent. You can't see it all. It's not, you know, it could be worse. And again, this is just an example. So if we wanted to duplicate that to get to the other side, we'd do just like we said. We would take that image, right click, duplicate. It's already cropped down well enough. Go to layer, transform, flip vertically. Now if it's going to be words and stuff in font, you're going to have to flip it vertically and horizontally, or it'll read backwards. Then we grab our move tool, grab it, hold control, and we'll move it down. And this time it doesn't have to be perfect, we just want to get it close, up maybe a little bit, and then that's how you essentially duplicate one side to the other. One other thing I'll show you really quick, if we hold control, hit E, it exports it right to the last place. We don't have to follow this pass program. We open up our replay, hold control, hit R, and there's a change that we made. Alright, now if you see where it's cut off here, I'll show you how I would address that issue. Let's minimize out of here. So you can see this layer belongs to this one down here. When I paint cars, I usually do the whole one side and maybe the hood and stuff first. And then if I'm happy with it, then I'll move everything to the other side of the car. That way I don't have a bunch of extra layers here and trying to figure out which one belongs to what. So this is the layer that I want to mess with. What I want to do is this ear point comes off of the back of that car and it just gets cut off, and we need to join it up here. So we're going to zoom in a little bit, and the best way to do this for me is you right click on that image and we're going to duplicate it again. And because it's transparent, it darkens it up because it's two transparent objects, semi-transparent. So we move this up and that ear is going to come up, who knows, somewhere in here probably. And because we only want this part is what we're playing with, we can cut the rest of this out of the image. So we go to our rectangle tool, we select everything we don't want. If you hold shift, it'll let you add another selection. So now you can see that I selected everything but this section right up here. Let me back out of that. If I didn't hold shift and I just went and selected this up here too, it just makes that a new selection. If you hold control, it's just the opposite. It subtracts part of that selection like so. So hold shift if you want to add to that selection instead of having to redo it. Now we want to delete all of that off of that layer because we don't need it. All we want is this section up here, and we left a little extra for movement room. Control Shift A to deselect. And where is that going to be? We're not sure. So let's take a look. Control E, export. Bring up your replay. Hold Control, hit E. Or, sorry, hit R. And it's not too far off. This definitely needs to be fixed. And what are we going to do? Well, it needs to be moved over a little bit, obviously. It's going to have to be rotated a little bit, counterclockwise, and it's going to have to be moved down. If I just moved it over, it's going to be too wide. So down, rotate counterclockwise a little bit, and move over towards the front of the car. Alright, so I'm using my arrow keys after I click in there. Down a little bit towards the front of the car. And when we go to rotate this, it's going to rotate that whole layer instead of just that section. So like everything that I didn't delete is still there. It makes it a little bit more difficult. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete everything we know we're not going to need. Oops, in this layer. Hold Shift. We're going to delete all that, and then we're going to crop this image down like I showed you before. Control Shift A to deselect. Make sure the image is selected. Right click, alpha to selection. Layer. Actually, we're going to do it this way. We're going to right click in here. Layer, crop to selection. So now when we rotate it, we're just rotating that block. Control Shift A to deselect. We're going to grab it, and we just need to rotate this just a little bit counterclockwise. Hit rotate. Now we're going to hold Control, hit E to export it. We're going to take another look. Control R to refresh it, and it's still not perfect. We got a couple options here. We can stretch this, actually is what I think I'm going to do instead of just moving it up. I'm just going to stretch that ear towards the back of the car a little bit. And we'll take a look, see how that looks. So we go to our resize, and even if keep aspect selected, you're okay. That's only for when you're grabbing the corners. But we're just going to stretch this. We're going to hold and move this. So, oops, that was a little. Let's reset. Scroll down. These centering bars can be a real problem because it tries to snap to those. So hold your mouse wheel and just stretch it maybe a little bit more. Let's try that. Hit scale. It'll also move this side over a little bit, and we want to stretch that back just a little bit. Hit scale. Control E to export it to the last place it was. Come in here, Control R, and we're still quite a bit off. So let's do some more work, and I'm going to move a little bit faster here. It's I think I've got the point across of what we're trying to do. Now it's still a little bit off. So all we probably need to do is, we need to bring this up a little bit actually, so that this gray matches, or this brown. So we'll bring it up a little bit. We'll probably move it over a notch, bring it up a notch, and then squeeze it back in. Actually, if I was doing this for a client, I'd probably reverse my steps, but let me take a look at that one more time. We need to bring this in a little bit, scale, and we need to bring this up a little bit. Now this is going to be quite a bit off, but it's going to make it easier to change in a minute. Yeah, that's too far off. We need to bring that down a little bit. And sometimes you have better luck than this. I'm not, but you could. You may have better luck than I do. And sometimes you get it on the first try. Sometimes it takes you a few, like what we're doing here. But with the new Control R feature, and it makes it much. There we go. That's pretty clean. I might be happy with that. It does rotate here a little bit more, and then it starts to come up, and it's a little bit flatter there. So I'd probably do it a little bit different next time if I was doing this for a client. But if you're looking at it from any of these other angles, I mean, it looks pretty good. And a good way to test that, the other thing what we can do is let's just change these transparencies all the way back up. like so. Control E. Oop, go in here. Control R. Yeah, that's not too bad. You can see the part. Yeah, that's not too bad. I mean, you would have trouble telling there's a seam there if you weren't looking for it. And now what you can do is merge those layers together. It just makes everything a little bit more manageable over here on the right. So we know it's this layer and this layer. Right click on the one above and then just go to merge down. And now that's all part of one layer. Now you can set your transparency and it does exactly the same for both of them. And it was before. So I think that's all we're going to touch on for this tutorial. Basically, we just covered duplicating images on the other side to make them look right. Now what I would do is I still have to do this, the tip of this ear over here. I would probably back up to where this was a layer by itself and then duplicate it and move it over here so I can just move that one little piece around and then merge these layers later. This looks like absolute shit. And so for the next tutorial, I think we will paint a car. But I think for the next tutorial, what I'll do is I might have some of this changed because I couldn't add enough shadows and stuff to this to make it look not like shit. But anyway, leave comments in the comment section below if you have any questions, or just leave them in the post, the thread on iRacing, or you can send me a PM and I'll try to answer anything I can. And we'll touch on some more stuff in the next tutorial. So happy painting, everybody.